broadcast at 6 p.m. on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM, Dakar. Also, don't miss our special monthly debate, which comes up every last Saturday of the month on trending political and governance issues in the sub-region. Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio. It's your time to speak.
WADR. You can listen to us on 94.9 FM in Dakar through our website www.wadr.org.
Where young people rallied against corruption, hardship, and repression. Here in Ghana, we have witnessed citizens rising with courage and conviction through movements such as Fix the Country some years ago, and still persistently calling for transparency, jobs, social justice, as well as the anti-Galamsey, the illegal mining protests in 2024 that continue to draw attention to the devastation of our environment and communities. And in a number of instances, the response to these protests have been police crackdowns, intimidation of peaceful protesters, and it has reignited national conversations about accountability, participation, boundaries of civic expression. Across our borders, there are movements like Yanama in Senegal, who continue to embody the enduring power of citizen mobilization through arts, culture, music, reminding us that creativity itself can also be a form of resistance. Together, these stories reveal a simple truth. West Africans are not silent or apathetic. They are asserting their voices, even when it's not trying to come out like mine, often at great personal risk. Yet, in too many contexts, civic courage continues to meet repression rather than reform. The official development assistance is dwindling. OECD projects further contraction in aid flows. Major donors have announced deep cuts to long-standing programs. The USAID stopped work orders, funding freezes earlier this year. All of these things have forced partners to suspend activities midstream, disrupted service delivery, led to job losses, and threatened the livelihoods of countless individuals, particularly local staff and community-based organizations who are the backbone of implementation. The ripple effects are across our region. Fewer predictable resources, reduced program continuity, growing anxiety within civil society about sustainability. So this moment compels us to rethink our dependence models and design locally rooted, self-sustained strategies for civic resilience. Yet, amid these headwinds, the spirit of the power of people remains alive. Across our region, youth-led movements, trade unions, community organizers continue to demand justice and reform. And environmental protection of our countries to Pan-African mobilization for debt relief and good governance. The energy is palpable. The threats are also real, but so too is the determination of our people to shape their future. So our task is to protect that energy, strengthen accountability, and ensure that civic action remains a force for inclusion and legitimacy. This week, however, is not a repetition of diagnosis. It is a call to redefine civil society in an era burdened with fragmentation, disinformation, and resource uncertainty. In Lagos, 2023, in Abuja, in 2024, we identified the challenges, shrinking civic space, technological disruptions, and the drift of institutional actors away from grassroots realities. Here in Accra, we moved deliberately to rebalancing our space. We will take strides towards redefining civil society and the future of democratic resilience in West Africa, reconnecting institutional CSOs with grassroots movements, aligning digital tools with local legitimacy, and building resource and accountability models that empower communities, not only sustain institutions. Redefinition also requires honesty. We must confront the internal weaknesses within our sector. Competition that erodes solidarity, dependence that undermines sustainability, and accountability frameworks that speak upwards, not downwards, not outwards. To renew trust, we must be as transparent and grounded as the values we defend, and those values must resonate in all that we do. We must practice what we preach. We operate in an environment where truth itself is contested. Disinformation spreads faster than facts. Technology, once a tool for liberation, is increasingly weaponized against civic actors. And yet, a budding generation of young organizers, creatives, and digital activists are redefining civic engagements. With a shrinking aid, increasing hostile online and offline environment, civil society must expand its toolkits. We must strengthen partnerships with investigative media, civic tech innovators, legal advocates, cultural collectives who transform frustration into action. We must also invest in digital security, fact-checking, and resilient systems that protect activists, organizations, and their communities. So we have a call to collective renewal. Redefining civil society will require 3 interlocking moves. 1, re-anchor legitimacy. Center our work in the lived realities of communities, making them co-creators, not beneficiaries. 2, building resilient financing. Innovate around local funding mechanisms, pooled indigenous philanthropy, regional funds, solidarity levies, and partnerships that sustain our operations when bilateral aid fluctuates. 3, forge principled and value-based coalitions. Institutional social movements, faith-based groups, fact-checkers, trade unions, and civic tech actors must unite around shared values and strategy for protection, advocacy, and voice. Over the next 2 days, we'll interrogate these ideas. Let Accra be a space of creative dissent and practical design, a right ground where ideas turn into action and action into measurable impact beyond 2025. To our partners, Ford Foundation, Spaces for Change, the CSR Hub network of different partners, and all who continue to invest in this ecosystem, thank you for your steadfast support. And to every activist, advocate, and civic leader here today, thank you for your courage, for your consistency, and your belief that democracy in West Africa can still thrive. We have work ahead. It's not going to be easy, but we also have imagination, we have networks, and an unbreakable will to rebuild civic trust and democratic resilience. So once again, welcome to West Africa Civil Society Week 2025. Let's make our time here together count. Thank you very much, Aqua.
We can do better, ladies and gentlemen. We can do better, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Dr. Nana. That was a very firm clarion call, inviting us to make use of this opportunity to forge principled and value-based coalitions that will enable us achieve our common goal. Thank you once again for that call. And I think we will make use of this space to achieve that goal. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful partner, the Spaces of Change, who will equally share some words of welcome. Permit me to invite Ms. Shola Olutayo, who is the Spaces for Change Ghana team lead, to do us the honors. Ms. Shola, please. Can we welcome her with an amazing round of applause? Merci beaucoup, Akwaba.
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, guests of honor, comrades, partners, and everyone in this room. Please permit me to stand on the existing protocol. I stand in the representative capacity in the person of Victoria Ibeze Mohere, who is the Executive Director of Spaces for Change West Africa. It is my pleasure to welcome all distinguished guests to the of West Africa, also known in our collective journey to reimagining civil society's role in safeguarding democracy across the region. In recent years, the civil society space in West Africa has become oversaturated with conversations around its contraction and a conference focusing on offering new solutions to the shrinking significant contribution to the discourse on countering democratic recession in Africa. It was upon this premise that Spaces for Change West Africa and WACSI, West Africa Civil Society Institute, conceived the idea of the Civil Society Week West Africa, also known as the West Africa Civil Society Week, which is now being implemented under the Civic Space Resource Hub project for West Africa, with the support of Ford Foundation. The first convening held in Lagos, Nigeria in 2023, and it looked at the role of civil society in consolidating democracy for regional development, while the second edition held in Abuja, Nigeria in 2024, it looked at the power of technology to advance democracy. During the 2024 edition, stakeholders across the sub-region explored the transformative role of technology in amplifying civic action. We were inspired by the momentum, and we look forward to continuing the journey. Please excuse me. For a stronger democratic future in West Africa. This edition has returned to focus on the dynamic and evolving role of civil society amid the worsening security condition, socioeconomic condition, and geopolitical shifts in the region. Speaking on the worsening security situation in Africa, a report by the African Union has tagged Africa as the world's terrorism hotspot, particularly the Sahel-Saharan region, the Horn of Africa, including Somalia, Kenya, Djibouti, and the Central Africa region. The African Union have also acknowledged that the resurgence of unconstitutional change of governments, the expanding threat of terrorism and violent extremism across the continent, including the influx of foreign terrorist fighters, private military companies and mercenaries, the proliferation of armed groups, as well as transnational organized crimes. They negatively impact the peace, security, stability, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Africa's states. In response to this attack on security, African governments have adopted different approaches, including the proliferation of counterterrorism laws that have overly broad measures against the legitimate operations of civil society groups. Several reports have revealed the important roles that civil society have played and are still playing in the fight against terrorism in the continent. To consolidate civil society's effort in Africa, Spaces for Change research, mapping civil society engagement in African-led peace operations, recognized notable Africa-led peace operations and counter-terrorism initiatives by African government, and did an extensive analysis on the composition, the scope, the status, and enabling framework, as well as the impact of these peace operations, while also highlighting the crucial role played by civil society organizations in addressing the insecurity in the sub-region. Africa-led peace operation has grown rapidly, displacing the previous arrangement where international organizations like the United Nations mobilize and deploy peacekeeping forces to conflict zones. It has been contended that international peace operations take time, involve extensive cost, human resources, together with numerous bureaucratic challenges. Hence, the rise of Africa in demonstrating commitment to finding homegrown solutions to its security challenges. According to Spaces for Change report, three reasons account for Africa taking the lead in addressing its own security challenges. The first is flexibility, innovation, and contextualization. The second is localized ownership of conflict. And the third is the growing capacity of regional organizations in Africa. The report extensively assessed the different initiatives that have emanated at a continental level, such as the African Union Transition Mission to Somalia, the Multinational Joint Task Force, which is authorized by the African Union Peace and Security Mandate. The Africa Standby Force, which is a security formation with multi-dimensional capabilities in the 5 regions of Africa. The Committee of Intelligence and Security Services that provide timely information on evolving violent conflict based on specifically developed indicators to help anticipate and prevent conflict on the continent. The Regional Cooperation Initiative against the Lord's Resistance Army, the African-led International Support Mission to Mali, the African Union Technical Team to the Gambia, the Panel of the Wise, and the African Transition Mission to Burundi, just to mention a few. All of these peace operations recorded different levels of achievement and successes. And the report objectively analyzed each operation and highlighted the gap that exists or that hampered some of the successes. Also, at a regional level, and across broader level, the report looked into peace operations like the Accra Initiative, the Group of Five for the Sahel, Joint Force, the Alliance of Sahel States, the Lake Chad Basin Commission, and the Economic Community of West African State Monitoring Group, all of which has helped improve cross-border cooperation and tactical coordination against insecurity amongst the states. What is most striking about this report is how it accurately tracked, identified, reported the strength and achievement of each of these peace operations. It also identified the gaps and the challenges in addressing unconventional threats and improving cooperation between regional security forces, the government, communities, and civil society, while also making recommendations based on the identified gaps. Major findings in the report on the gaps and challenges with the African-led peace operations include external interference and dependence over securitization and militarization. State actors are often complicit in regional conflict. Furthermore, funding challenges, operational deficit, and human rights abuses. And lastly, limited civil society engagement. The report conclusively referenced a joint civil society declaration made at the Sub-Saharan Africa Civil Society Countering the Financing of Terrorism Conference held in 2024. It made major recommendations to government, civil society, policymakers, academia, religious bodies, researchers, and communities in ensuring the effective implementation of countering the financing of terrorism measures while safeguarding the civic space. As co-host of the Civil Society Week West Africa, which is also known as the Civil Society Week for West Africa, S4C would like to urge African states to move beyond rhetoric commitments on human rights and place them at the heart of their peace, security, counterterrorism measures. This approach is imperative because there cannot be sustainable democratic progress and stability in the continent without adequate security guarantees. While an extensive unpacking of this report will be done at a Peace, Security, and Justice Imperative session later on today, please permit my colleagues to distribute copies of this report because it will lay the foundation and will inform the context of civil society's role in building democratic resilience in Africa. Building resilience lies at the core of Ford Foundation's Weaving Resilience project, under which this conference is being held. Recognizing that civic space is under threat in many parts of the world, including the Global South, the Weaving Resilience is a network of resource hubs dedicated to supporting civil society organizations to hone their strategies for social justice, to also enhance their narrative power, strengthen their institutions, and further innovate their capacity building technologies. In the Global South, the mission of the Weaving Resilience is to strengthen and connect CSOs and movements on the front line of the fight for social justice. Over the next 2 days, you will learn more about the services afforded under the Weaving Resilience Initiative across West Africa, and the impact being institutional and sectorial. For instance, S4C has organized about 15 editions of the NGO regulatory compliance, reaching over 269 non-profit organizations in West African countries. The RCC has helped to improve the civil society groups' compliance with regulatory standards in the sub-region. The Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, in its 2023 revised Recommendation 8 Best Practice Paper, has recognized Spaces for Change Regulatory Compliance Clinic as a global best practice for mitigating terrorism financing abuse in the nonprofit sector. It showcased how local activism is influencing and also countering terrorism financing narratives at the international level. In conclusion, we are grateful to the Ford Foundation for supporting the Civic Space Resource Hub, under which the Civil Society Week West Africa is being convened. Please, ladies and gentlemen, relax, network, and enjoy the discussions lined up over the next 2 days. Once again, I would like to say good morning and thank you as you enjoy a good time in this conference.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Shola. A very brilliant appreciation of the peace, development, and democracy architecture in the region and the continent. We really do appreciate that. And please make use of the resources that were being shared to better understand the subject. Just to invite or welcome the colleagues who are joining us, should you need the interpretation equipment to follow the conversations in your language of preference, please kindly wave and my colleagues will hand over the equipment to you shortly. Donc, pour ceux qui viennent de nous rejoindre, bienvenue. Si vous avez besoin de l'équipement d'interprétation, bien vouloir signaler, vous pouvez soulever votre main et mes collègues vont venir vers vous pour donner les équipements. Merci beaucoup. At this juncture, permit me to very warmly introduce us to that wonderful partner who has been a facilitator, a catalyzer, a supporter of this great initiative. One of the most favorite foundations in the region, who has been bent on making sure that democracy progresses on the continent and other development dividends are felt by West Africans. With a warm applause, ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome the grants officer of the Ford Foundation, Ms. Onyinye Onyemobe. Can we put our hands together for this wonderful colleague, sister of ours, representing a foundation of choice? Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Good morning. Before I read my remarks on behalf of the regional director, I would like to say Happy International Men's Day. We did not forget. Okay, so I bring you greetings from Yes, they deserve it. Another round of applause for the men in the room. Good, 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 good. Okay, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, partners, your excellencies in the room, good morning. It's my privilege to be with you in Accra and it's an honor for the Ford Foundation to stand alongside two powerful organizations, WACSI and Spaces for Change. They are our ecosystem partners, and as we open this year's Civil Society Week. This annual convening has become one of the most important platforms for examining the state of civic space in West Africa. And each year, it brings together leaders, innovators, advocates, and thinkers who are shaping the civic landscape of our region. And as you know, this year's theme, Redefining Civil Society and the Future of Democratic Resilience in West Africa, challenges us to look beyond business as usual and envision what a stronger, more inclusive civic future must look like. For the Ford Foundation, our investment in this convening is both intentional and deeply meaningful. The annual Civil Society Week over the past 3 years emerged under the Civil Society Resource Hub, as you already have heard this morning. And it's supported under the Ford's Weaving Resilience Program, which is a multi-year effort to strengthen the long-term adaptability, power, and sustainability of civil society ecosystem in the Global South. Here in West Africa, this program, of course, is anchored by our two regional partners, the West African Civil Society Institute, WACSI, and Spaces for Change. These hubs serve as center for learning, collaboration, digital security, movement building, and they have been instrumental to shaping the conversations that brought us here today. I also want to recognize the impact that they have made. I know Shola touched on that a bit during her remarks, but it has become a cornerstone for monitoring civic trends, building legal capacity, supporting civic actors across the region to navigate complex and often restrictive environments. Together, the activities under the Resource Hub and the different organizations who have now benefited from the programs form a powerful ecosystem, one that the Ford Foundation is proud to support. And we are also happy and proud of the collaboration that WACSI Civic Spaces for Change is building with the government of Ghana to make sure that we have a free civic space for everyone. Our commitment to this work is rooted in a simple but profound belief that there is no democracy without an empowered and a resilient civil society. This is a principle championed consistently by our former Vice President, Dr. Darren Walker, whose reflections guided so much of our work. Darren reminds us that inequality is the greatest threat to democracy, not only because it creates economic divides, but because it erodes trust, weakens institutions, and robs people of hope. And as he often says, hope is the oxygen of democracy. If people lose hope in the systems meant to protect and include them, democracy becomes fragile, and that's what we are facing across the region today. But when civil society is strong, when people are organized, connected, informed, and able to hold power accountable, hope is restored and democratic resilience becomes possible. Again, let me reiterate what the previous speakers, Nana and Shola, already highlighted. Given the opportunity we all have this week, which offers us a chance to reflect deeply and to ask ourselves these questions. How should we envision the world, given that things are evolving and changing, both politically and otherwise? What new forms of organizing should we be doing? What kinds of leaders should we be raising? And what kind of solidarity do we need? And if we indeed say it's not business as usual, then we really have to think differently as to what solutions we have ahead of us. How do we build civic infrastructures that can withstand political shocks, misinformation, inequality, and digital threats? And perhaps most importantly, how do we ensure that civic space remains a space for all of us, especially those who are often excluded and are at the margins? Over the next few days, we will hear remarkable thinkers, practitioners from the field, our partners, our friends, engage in conversations that will shape or shaped by research, lived experiences, bold imaginations, people who have been rethinking democracy and everything else that we'll discuss in this space. We would also hear people talk about how to build civic architecture that our region needs urgently. On behalf of the Ford Foundation's Regional Director, Dr. Chichi Aniagolu Okoye, I want to express our deep appreciation to WACSI for convening us and getting us here safely in Accra, and to Spaces for Change and the Civil Society Resource Hub for their leadership, and to everyone who is seated here for your courage, your persistence, and your unwavering commitment to democracy, justice, and dignity. We are proud to stand with you. We are proud to invest in the ecosystem, and I think we would continue to do so. We are also proud to help power the resilience that we all need, especially in the moments that we live in, to define the future of civic life and democratic possibilities in West Africa. With this, I would like to wish us all a meaningful, energizing, transformative civil society week. Thank you very much. Happy International Men's Day again. Do make sure to take the women out. Thank you.
Oh, Ninia, you are the best. Can we put our hands together for her? You know, I can say this is one of those memorable moments in my life that I've felt good to be a man. Happy Men's Day to all of us. Thank you very much, and really, we appreciate those kind words. And the core, one thing that you evoked is the very important question that we should keep on our minds as the conversations unfold in this space. How should we envision the world? I think if we have clarity on what we want the world to be, particularly our beautiful sub-region, we will be able to engage in meaningful conversations that will help shape the future we want. Une fois de plus, merci beaucoup. And for those who are just joining us, we would like you to follow these conversations seamlessly. Please make sure you get the interpretation equipment, so just wave if you need one. Donc, si vous venez de nous rejoindre, bien vouloir demander l'équipement d'interprétation pour que vous puissiez suivre les conversations sans perturbation. Thank you once again. At this juncture, we will be inviting one of our very distinguished guests for the opening remarks. He would have loved to be here with us. However, due to equally very important engagements, he has sent his warm regards and, of course, a message that I am sure will keep us on our toes and on our reflective nerves to make sure that we make the most of these 2 days. Permit me, ladies and gentlemen, and our wonderful technical team, to welcome, though in absentia, with a very warm round of applause, His Excellency, Dr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers, African Union High Representative for Silencing the Guns at the African Union. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome him, even as our great. Thank you very much, sir. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous. Nous sommes très, très ravis de vous avoir ici. Vous avez la parole. Thank you very much.
On the protocols already established at your conference. I bring you warm greetings from Abuja, where I am attending the 10th anniversary celebrations of the Goodluck Ebele Jonathan Foundation as keynote speaker. Allow me to thank the organizers of the West Africa Civil Society Week for inviting me to give brief remarks, and to commend them for the thoughtful theme, Redefining Civil Society and the Future of Democratic Resilience in West Africa. I would like to particularly appreciate my sister, Dr. Mrs. Nana Afijenu, Executive Director of WADR, and her colleagues at OSIWA for helping to create this strategic capacity building institute for civil society organizations in West Africa, and working hard as WADR staff to make it one of the most impactful training centers on the continent. Across our sub-region, we see multiple overlapping shocks: democratic backsliding, weakening regional cooperation, shrinking civil spaces, and growing insecurity. The recent exit of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger exposed the deep fissures, testing the strength of our regional solidarity and shared identity. Over 3 decades since the wave of democratic transition swept across our sub-region, many of our citizens still ask a simple but piercing question: what has democracy delivered? Too often, our democracies have been reduced to periodic elections, noisy and competitive, yes, but disconnected from the everyday struggles of the people. We have witnessed the rise of what some people call choiceless democracies, political systems that allow citizens to vote, yet leave them without real power to influence the economic structures that shape their lives. Transparency International's 2024 Corruption Perception Index ranks Sub-Saharan Africa as the lowest scoring region globally. In too many places, public office has become a private enterprise, with laws written to protect elites, not citizens. Yet even in this turbulence, the desire for democracy remains strong. According to the latest Afrobarometer survey, nearly 2/3 of Africans still prefer democracy to any other form of government. They still prefer to choose their governments, who rules them. The message is clear. Our people have not given up on democracy. They are asking for it to work fairly, inclusively, and accountably, to deliver democracy dividends. Democracy and development meet most meaningfully in the lives of ordinary people, in classrooms, in hospitals, in clean water taps, and in decent jobs. We must therefore prioritize universal access to quality education, healthcare, social protection, and indeed, taking the commanding heights of our resources as the very foundation of our democratic projects. A democracy that cannot guarantee basic human needs and control over resources, no matter how resilient, will always stand on fragile ground. Civil society has been both a conscience and catalyst in West Africa's democratic evolution, from the struggles against military rule to today's battles against state capture, corruption, and disinformation. However, let's face it, CSOs must also look inward with honesty. The phenomenon of NGOization has distanced many organizations from their grassroots constituencies. The tendency to advance the agenda of funders at the expense of local needs has weakened their authenticity and responsiveness to the communities they represent. Today, the civic landscape is more diverse and dynamic than ever before. New actors are reshaping what civic engagement looks like, from youth-led movements such as Yanamar in Senegal and SARS in Nigeria to Fix the Country in Ghana. These movements have shown how digital mobilization, art, and culture can inspire agency and accountability. Across our continent, digital activists and fact-checkers are defending truth in an era of disinformation. Women's movements are confronting gender-based violence, exclusion, and injustice with renewed vigor. These emerging actors are not replacing traditional CSOs. They are expanding civic space. The challenge is to build bridges, not barriers, between formal organizations and informal movements, between generations, between physical and digital activism. We must design collaboration protocols that enable trust, shared strategy, and complementary roles. Technology has become both a tool of liberation and a weapon of repression. In 2024 alone, Africa witnessed a record 21 internet shutdowns across 15 countries, often timed to silence dissent. At the same time, artificial intelligence and social media are being weaponized to spread falsehoods, polarize communities, and undermine elections. Yet, technology also offers unprecedented opportunities through AI-enabled fact-checking, open source investigations, and digital literacy. Campaigns, civic actors are reclaiming truth and strengthening accountability. As donor funding shrinks and global aid frameworks evolve, we can no longer depend on project cycles or external validation. We must rebuild from the ground up, anchoring legitimacy in the people, not in proposals. We must become accountable downward to citizens, not only upwards to funders. Civil society, we gather today to redefine, and the future of democratic resilience in West Africa we seek to imagine must therefore be community-centered, movement-driven, and solidarity-based. Indeed, the African Union Silencing the Guns initiative cannot succeed without a redefined civic and sustained role of CSOs. You are the transmission belt that connects this lofty goal to tangible action on the ground. You are the early warners of storm clouds, the advocates for accountability, and the builders of resilient and democratic societies. A secure, peaceful, conflict-free, and prosperous Africa is the ultimate prerequisite for silencing the guns and achieving the Africa we want in the broader context of Africa's Union Agenda 2063. A secured, peaceful, conflict-free, and prosperous Africa is the ultimate prerequisite for silencing the guns and achieving the Africa we want. As the adage goes, a time of challenges is also a time of opportunities. Let the West Africa Civil Society Week, Accra 2025 mark the beginning of a new chapter in our sub-region's civic journey, one defined by resilience, unity, and hope. Together, we must silence the guns and work to build a peaceful, stable, democratic, and prosperous Africa. I wish you fruitful deliberations and thank you for your kind attention. I stand on the protocol.
You're still listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, and this is the live coverage of the West Africa Civil Society Week 2025, happening live in the Ghanaian capital of Accra. Well, the last voice you heard there was His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers, African Union High Representative for Silencing the Guns, African Union, giving his opening remarks. And earlier you heard Dr. Catherine Chinedum Anyago Lokoye, Executive Director of Ford Foundation West Africa Office. And before her, you heard Ms. Victoria Ibezimo Hairi, Executive Director Spaces for Change S4C. And the first voice you heard when we connected was that of Dr. Nana Afajinu, the Executive Director, West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI. And they are the ones hosting this 2024 West Africa Civil Society Week. And it's in partnership with West Africa Democracy Radio and other partners. Well, just after this, the event will be breaking for a group photo session, but we are still expecting at least two speeches before the coffee break and the group photo. And the speeches will come from His Excellency Zaya Choudhury, the United Nations Resident Coordinator in Ghana. And just before the break, we'll be having some performances from the Abibi Groma Culture Troupe from the University of Ghana, Legon. All right, so we are heading back to Accra to join the live event.
From being Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection and being in the trenches with us all under the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative in charge of the Africa Office, to International Federation of Women Lawyers, to African Women Lawyers Association, and also the Human Rights Advocacy Center. I have had the rare privilege of working hand in hand with both Ghana and Africa's civil society for us jointly to drive transformative reforms and legislation in human rights protection, women's empowerment, governance, and in inclusion of vulnerable groups. These experiences have strengthened my conviction that civil society is not just a stakeholder in our democratic journey. It is the heartbeat of our democratic journey in Africa.
Today, as we reflect on redefining our role and shaping the future of democratic resilience in West Africa, I am reminded of the strong power that we hold when we stand together, firm, brave, and courageous. When we stand together, we are fearless, we are visionary, and we are unwavering in our pursuit for justice and dignity for humanity. And as we evaluate this week the state of civil society in West Africa and the work to redefine the purpose, both conceptually and operationally, we must open the space for institutions, social movements, and emerging actors to move from parallel silo efforts to deliberate collaboration so we can move effectively and anticipate threats to democracy. We can plug in the gaps in accountability and also build adaptive capacity that our people need. We must be relevant to our people. Civil society's role in policymaking, governance, and democratic life is indisputable. Be it policy choices, accountability, tracking public spending and service delivery, holding governments to account, mobilizing citizens, and piloting practical solutions that government can scale. Ghana's democratic credentials are partly and largely due to a vibrant civil society and NGOs. Under President John Dramani Mahama, especially his second coming, there is a marked and encouraging renewal of commitments to build strong frameworks and policies that genuinely enable civil society to thrive and that for them to meaningfully contribute to nation building. These are but a few of the interventions and collaboration. In May 2025, some of you and government convened a civil society leaders meeting at the presidency to get the buy-in of civil society on establishing a governance advisory council with a mandate to monitor and advise on human rights, corruption, and good governance. There was a collaboration and there were a series of meetings and consultations. And I'm happy to inform you that Cabinet has approved a bill that establishes the Governance Advisory Council, and this is on its way to Parliament for their consideration and adoption as an act of Parliament. This advisory council, among others, will promote good governance and integrity and will review performance of governance institutions to promote accountability and responsiveness in public administration and decision-making processes. Another powerful illustration of President John Dramani Mahama's deep respect and partnership with civil society and the media occurred on the 3rd of October. On the 3rd of October, he met civil society and the media to discuss strategies and solutions to combat galamsey illegal mining in Ghana. By bringing together CSOs, traditional religious authorities, academia, labor unions, and everyday citizens, the president is institutionalizing a mechanism that honors and respects diversity and dissenting voices, that listens to their evidence-based proposals and ensures that their recommendations feeds directly into policy making and accountability. More so, the Mahama administration has shown respect for data-driven civil society advocacy. For instance, the Back IT Ghana reports that government has collaborated more closely with civil actors to increase transparency and make procurement data more accessible, hold budget hearings, and establish anti-corruption mechanisms that are grounded in civil society expertise. In concrete policy action, this government is working with CSOs to also pass the non-profit bill that will formalize and strengthen the existing environment for NGOs. Civil society, and I must commend you because I'm part of this, is also lending immense support to government and other anti-corruption institutions in drafting of Ghana's second National Anti-Corruption Strategic Plan. I can report that the NACAP2 committee is at its drafting stages and will complete the stage by November 30th. This follows several technical meetings to define and refine ideas. Yesterday, that is the 18th of November, at the Office of the President, there was a meeting between the President of Ghana and the Christian Council over a number of national issues. I was there and I recall there was the issue of Galamsey, there was the issue also of corruption, and the President pledged maintaining the Ghana family values through appropriate legislation and called on all, including the clergy and civil society, to consistently and constantly partner government for good governance. All these developments show that government does not merely tolerate dissent, it embraces dissent. It channels this through formal structures and acts on it, a promising foundation for a resilient democracy and a vital model for civil society across the whole of West Africa. We are looking at a newly oriented civil society in West Africa. And I'm happy that just like governments, we are also reimagining, we are also looking at resilience and are also interrogating the future actions. Because we live in a moment when African civil society must re-energize and recommit to our core principles that will sustain democracy, especially in a fast evolving world where technology delivers both a huge opportunity on one hand and a huge risk or a great risk on the other. We have digital tools, we have artificial intelligence and social media that can deepen participation and inclusiveness and transparency, but on the other hand, can also weaponize and also facilitate misinformation and surveillance and manipulation. As civil society actors, we must be committed to good governance and democratic resilience. Our greatest concern must be how we can harness the emerging technology to reduce, if not eliminate, electoral violence, democratic instability, and cycles of conflict that continue to plague West Africa. Consider, for instance, that several West African countries where democracy still remains under strain. Civil society, therefore, has a strategic and critical role to play here. We must promote digital resilience, advocate for ethical governance of technology, and build strong participatory platforms that channel local community voices into national decision-making, even in the context of political crisis. So these are some recommendations for building strong, resilient, democratic futures, not only in Ghana, but also throughout West Africa. 1, we must strengthen civic tech infrastructure. We must support the development of open data platforms digital tools, and mobile-based reporting systems so that citizens, CSOs, and government can monitor elections, public service delivery, and human rights violations in real time. And we saw that in Ghana when a few days ago, a man was seen beating up his wife, stripped her naked, beating her up. Very swiftly, the social media space responded and he has been arrested. That is addressing human rights violations in real time. We must promote digital literacy and media literacy, implement regional programs that help the citizens in West Africa to distinguish and differentiate disinformation from facts, and also to understand AI-generated content and safely engage online, especially our young persons and adolescents. Also to build a more informed, digitally empowered populace across West Africa. Third, we must institutionalize multi-stakeholder advisory bodies, encourage governments to establish governance councils like is happening in Ghana presently, including civil society, youth, women, academia, persons with disabilities, traditional leaders that regularly review policy, that particularly look at technology, security, and democratic reforms. 4, we must advocate for legal and regulatory frameworks, push for legislation at the national and regional levels that guarantee civic space, that protects freedom of expression, that respects diversity, and regulates the use of surveillance technology, especially those frameworks that are based on human rights, transparency, and accountability. 5, we must mobilize for regional solidarity. We must facilitate cross-border CSO networks that coordinate rapid responses to democratic backsliding, that monitor regional elections and advocate together for ECOWAS and AU mechanisms that will defend constitutional order. We must incorporate and undertake more affirmative action laws and policies for women and persons with disability. We must leverage on research and evidence-based advocacy and support community-led peace-building work at the grassroots to promote inclusive dialogue. In pursuing this renewed vision for democratic resilience, African civil society must recommit to the patriotic, ethical, and fiercely independent discharge of its duties. Our utmost fidelity must remain with the people of West Africa. We must serve the nations that we seek to strengthen. Civil society cannot and must not allow itself to be used as a vehicle for partisan controversies, for narrow propaganda, or for the parochial interests of a few. The moral authority and public trust that CSOs command comes from your credibility, impartiality, and principled commitment to justice and accountability. So when civil society stands firm on ethical ground, grounded in evidence, and guided by the public interest, it becomes an anchor of stability, especially in moments when political tensions rise, democratic norms are contested, and misinformation spreads rapidly through digital spaces. This ethical grounding is not merely aspirational, it is strategic. A civil society that maintains its independence and integrity becomes a powerful force, capable of mobilizing citizens. The citizens will listen to civil society and counter democratic backsliding mediate tensions, safeguard elections, and ensure that governance aligns with the aspirations of the people and not just ambitions of individuals. Such steadfastness is essential if we are to build a future where democracy in West Africa is not only resilient, but is genuinely transformative. In conclusion, we cannot leave this forum of strong, enduring democracy to politicians and lawmakers or state institutions alone. We cannot leave building of a strong and enduring democracy to politicians, lawmakers, and state institutions alone. We must be at the center. We must be integral and an indispensable partner in shaping the democratic destiny of countries in West Africa and Africa as a whole. This is our responsibility and our commitment as civil society. We must safeguard our freedoms, amplify the voices of our citizens, and uphold accountability that belongs to all of us. And civil society stands at the heart of this very shared duty. If the many civil society organizations at all levels and across West Africa come together under the rubric of this conference, united in purpose, focused and coordinated in action, and grounded in integrity, then truly nothing can stop the tremendous impact that you will make. Together, we all can forge a democratic future for West Africa that is resilient, that is inclusive, that is innovative, and that is worthy of the hopes of the people of West Africa. God bless West Africa. God bless Ghana.
We really deeply appreciate these kind words coming from a government representative. And one thing caught my attention. We need a renewed civil society, a re-energized civil society. And seeing all of us here today gives me that hope that we are committed to the renewal of the space so that together we can work hand in glove with governments and ensure that democracy really serves as a tool for development in our region. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, permit me, we will be having a little swap on the program. We have received very kind words from colleagues, and there are a few more to go. But before we do that, Ghana is a hospitable country. Ghanaians are very hospitable people. And Ghana being my second home and being a Kwame, it is important that we share the hospitality that characterizes us with everyone here. We will be inviting the very wonderful cultural troupe, the Abibi Groma Culture Troupe of the University of Ghana, to share with us some love and wonderful beats and sounds from the people of Ghana. Colleagues, media colleagues, please, we would kindly invite you to remove your microphones while we move the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, let us put our hands together as we enjoy and welcome this wonderful group.
Sunday.
It's hard to explain, okay? But
All day. All year round.
it's so mysterious.
This is who we are.
This is who we are. WADR.
WADR. You can listen to us on 94.9 FM in Dakar through our website www.wadr.org.
All right, welcome back. It's 10:52 a.m. from our studios here, and you're still listening to the live coverage of the 2025 West Africa Civil Society Week happening in the Ghanaian capital of Accra. Well, you heard there the official opening by the special guest of honor, Ms. Nana Oye Bampo Ado. She is the Deputy Chief of Staff Office of the President of Ghana. And earlier you heard there His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers just before that. And currently what is happening now is the main performance by Abibi Groma Culture Troupe from the University of Ghana, Legon. And as soon as we are able to get the audio of that culture performance, we will bring it to you. In the meantime, a follow-up one will be happening much later in the coming hour, and just after that is going to be a photograph where there will also be coffee break and networking, plus some interviews. And just after that, you will have the keynote address by His Excellency Ambassador Abdel Fattah, Commissioner of Political Affairs, Peace and Security, ECOWAS Commission. And then we will kick off with the plenary session where with the theme Economic Integration, Democratic Governance, Shared Prosperity and Sustainable Development in West Africa. Now, this session will look at how rule of law, transparency and accountable institutions contribute to regional trade and investment gains, and how African philanthropy and regional financial institutions can finance civic infrastructure and crowd in private capital, driving inclusive growth, sustainable development, and democratic resilience, reconciling universal, local, and contested narratives on democracy. All right, let's take you back to the event ongoing in Accra.
Professor Nana Tanko saying, "This is my beloved country where we've done some great work." I could see Dr. Akwete saying, "This is what we can offer the people of West Africa." Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience at this juncture. And we would like to invite the media colleagues to reset their equipment or put their equipment here for this very important moment, where we will be taking the keynote address. Dear media colleagues, if you can, please do. Thank you very much. And for those who are just joining us, pour ceux qui viennent de nous joindre, bien vouloir demander l'équipement d'interprétation, vous pouvez soulever votre main et mes collègues vont diriger vers vous avec ces équipements. So if you're just joining us and you need the interpretation equipment, kindly wave and one of my colleagues will get one for you. Thank you very much, sir. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, we will be taking the keynote address from a very senior, respected diplomat, one whose attention and effort has been dedicated to the work of civil society in ensuring that we have the collaboration we need in driving the agendas that we aim for. Permit me invite His Excellency Ambassador Abdel Fattah Musa to come to the podium. And please, can we show some love, ladies and gentlemen? Merci beaucoup, Son Excellence. Nous apprécions votre présence avec nous et vous avez la parole.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Ouais. Bonjour, nos collègues de l'Afrique francophone et autres. Soyez le bienvenu à Accra. Isn't it wonderful that for a very refreshing change, the vast majority of those who have taken the podium today are women? Yeah. Yes. And on the International Day of Men. Yeah, so the men are becoming the endangered species. And for the better, because on all parameters, women have proven more careful, more dedicated, and given equal opportunities, they've often excelled men. Yeah, and just a small element of it on the side, you know that women constitute a minimum of 50% of the population. But there was a sociologist who did a random sample of obituaries. And out of about 500 samples that he took, about 70% of them, the obituary always ended by survived by a widow. 70% survived by the widow and children, meaning on the average, we have a shorter lifespan, women. And it is important for us to give the relay to women for continuity and for institutional memory, even if for nothing else. You know, so we honor you today. Excellency Nana Oye Bampo Ado, Deputy Chief of Staff in the Office of the President of the Republic of Ghana, Dr. Nana Asantua Fajinu, my sister and what is it, a comrade in arms and in crimes over the years. And mentors, many mentors that I see here, and led by Mohamed Ibn Chambers, His Excellency, the High Representative for Silencing the Guns for the African Union, who have always been an inspiration, you know, to this region and beyond. There are civil society leaders here, many colleagues that I know from citizen organizations and networks across West Africa and beyond, esteemed opinion and policy leaders and champions of democracy, members of the diplomatic corps here, bilateral and multilateral partners, friends of the media, and most importantly, our esteemed interpreters. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I feel incredibly privileged and humbled for the honor to be among this distinguished gathering of statesmen and women, mentors, opinion shapers, academics, and civil society leaders, and to deliver the keynote address as we begin our deliberations on the place and agency of citizens in consolidating democratic culture at this inflection point in geostrategic and geopolitical repositioning in our world. The theme of this year's West Africa Civil Society Week, Redefining Civil Society and the Future of Democratic Resilience in West Africa, aptly captures the moment. From the onset and on behalf of the ECOWAS Commission, I wish to pay real homage to His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, ably represented here by our sister, the Chief of Staff, and the government of Ghana, for the transformative agenda to make Ghanaians rediscover their agency and dreams through astute microeconomic, graft-busting, and citizen empowerment policies. That we are gathered here today in total freedom and enjoying the proverbial akwaba, even as we discuss serious and sensitive matters, bears testimony to Ghana's position as a beacon of democracy and open society in Africa, even in times of uncertainties and the existential challenges facing our region. I also express gratitude to my sister, Dr. Nana Afajino, and her team at the West Africa Civil Society Institute for the kind invitation and the wonderful achievement, transformative interventions that they have developed and to unleash the agency of civil society for nation building and democratic consolidation over the past 20 years. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my intention in this presentation is to stimulate a dispassionate discourse about the role of citizens, how to redefine it in today's circumstances, as well as their communities and leadership in West Africa at this inflection point in global governance by briefly tracing the historical trajectory of West African citizens and their organization, ECOWAS, till this moment that we are in, and then to outline the current challenges facing democratic consolidation efforts in the region, and to suggest a way forward for civil society and its leadership to rediscover their mission as a pillar and irresistible force capable of steering the region toward democratic renewal and assertion of regional agency and autonomy. ECOWAS was founded by the Treaty of Lagos in 1975 at the height of the Cold War, when the NATO alliance and the Warsaw Pact countries ruled the global rules and cast spheres of proxy influence guided by conflicting ideological, economic, and cultural paradigms. The emergence of the non-aligned movement at the time was the closest attempt by the developing world to stay equidistant from the ravaging global powers at the time. Democracy was only a fleeting determining factor in governance, though citizens fought for basic human rights inspired by the UN Charter and other such instruments. As a consequence, ECOWAS was founded along the line of least resistance, economic integration, and very little more. The Bretton Woods institutions, which shaped the global financial markets post-World War II and kept Africa under captive markets, held Africa back from industrialization and perpetuated stunted growth in virtually all sectors through the infamous structural adjustment programs, underpinned by labor and student protests, protest by social movement against bad governance and hardships. Often these struggles were hijacked by the military, and the period saw the violent alternation of power between short-lived experimental democratic administrations and autocratic and military regimes. Fast forward to 1989, the Cold War ended with the United States and its allies emerging as the preeminent global force dictating a new rules-based international order, so-called. Russia was weakened. China was yet to flex its economic muscle. These circumstances favored the emergence of multilateralism between 1989 and for West Africa, I dare say up to about 2020, under Pax Americana. Shorn of the security shield hitherto provided by the opposing global powers, military dictatorial and aristocratic, autocratic rulers were exposed to the power of pent-up frustration and anger of citizens across Africa. The period, therefore, saw the zenith of civil society action in West Africa, not seen since the anti-colonial struggles of the 1950s and 1960s. The period was also marked by the flourishing of multi-party democracy, where the ballot ruled over the gun, spurred by national sovereign conferences and constitution-making processes. Thus, up until about 2020, every West African nation chose its leaders through the ballot box, with varying and uneven degrees of transparency and credibility. The period also witnessed the unprecedented frequency with which incumbents were defeated at the ballot box, leading to alternations of power, if not a turnaround in the fortunes of the governed. Military incursions into politics were rare, and those that occurred were quickly reversed thanks to united regional and international pressure that the unipolar world facilitated. However, liberal democracy as practiced in West Africa and Africa at large comes with very fatal flaws that require very serious surgery if it is to survive the current global turbulence. A key factor of the unity, potency, and agency of civil society during the Cold War and the return to liberal democracy in the 1990s is very obvious. Civil society was fighting a common and identifiable enemy, be it the colonial powers or the autocratic, dictatorial, or military regimes on the continent. There was a common enemy. Today, things have changed, things are more fluid, and civil society has to take the current environment in consideration in reshaping their stance today. Excellencies, the current trend of democratic backsliding is spurred by fatal failures of practiced liberal democracy, both within Africa and globally. Internally, it is obvious that captured liberal democracy and governance deficits have led to mass disenchantment across the region and ruptured the social contract between the citizenry and the state. These failures include, but not limited to, 1, governance and development deficits, that the state capture, economic mismanagement, currency instability, retreat from the periphery, marginalization, and selective provision of basic services. We see at times a retreat into identity politics and amidst rampant corruption. 2, manipulation of constitutional and electoral norms to maintain elected leaders in power. Member states of ECOWAS signed up to the ECOWAS protocols that bind them to the constitutional convergent principles and liberal democracy, which declares zero tolerance for power obtained usually by the military or maintained by civilians through unconstitutional means. However, in several instances, elected leaders have weaponized the judiciary in particular, which has become the worst performing element in the separation of powers, and instrumentalize also security forces to silence dissent and enable unconstitutional maintenance of power. If you look at the current political environment, the emergent and disseminating threat has seen major opposition parties, coalitions, and candidates surgically excised from elections through judicial processes, thereby depriving elections of competitiveness and denying real choices to the electorate at the ballot box. Elections are now becoming a procession instead of real elections. And the factors driving this trend include, that is on the part of the incumbents, contrived constitutional reforms, weaponization of the judiciary, and importantly, the enforced silencing of civil society voices, but on the other side, the weakness of our opposition parties in the region and their gullibility of opposition parties, and also facilitate this state of affairs. To the relentless demographic shift in our region towards a younger generation and the attendant youth bulge, high unemployment, underemployment among the 60% of the population and counting. And then 4, the perceived control of internal governance decisions by external powers. Finally, climate change, which is spurring competition and intercommunal violence across our region. But what are the external factors? Globally, the world, and West Africa for that matter, is back to the Cold War, but with a very dangerous twist. We are navigating uncharted waters in not only a multipolar world, but also a multivectorial, with multivectorial axis within each of the poles. Cascading terrorism, violent extremism, worsening transnational organized crime, and crucially, the explosion of AI-powered social media stand in sharp contrast to the period under the Cold War and have injected unpredictability into global trends. The resurgence of unconstitutional changes of government and the withdrawal of the 3 key member states of ECOWAS, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, from the community should be understood within the context of these internal failings and the global environment that made this possible. The deliberate campaign to denigrate democracy in favor of the rule of strong men and strong women dominates the airwaves today and media platforms in the region. However, emerging trends and empirical data demonstrate that regime security cannot be a substitute for democracy and development, and various surveys, including Afrobarometer, as cited by His Excellency Mohammed Ibn Chambers, Freedom House, and others attest to this. Disturbingly, however, just as in the Cold War, when Africa served as pawns in the geopolitical battles, the continent once more is not an agent today influencing the direction of multipolarity, but a bystander and an object of the tumultuous global shifts underway today. And that is very important. In the Cold War, we were objects. In the multipolar world, we are still watching to see what it has in store for us instead of taking charge and directing multipolarity. And social media is the key example of it. You know, that who controls the algorithms, who controls the content, the platform will always control our minds. And so competition to control artificial intelligence becomes very critical. Recently in the press, Google was forced to apologize, because of the algorithms and others it fed its AI platform. And when a group of Black men and women were seen in a picture and somebody commanded AI to tell them what was there, the answer was, these are primates. Because the one who controls the platform has his biases, and this is done to favor that particular group of people. So if we do not wrest control of these processes, AI, the media landscape today and others, we will continue lamenting. We will not have a platform to tell our own story, which is so critical in today's world. Excellencies, ECOWAS's foundational mission, edged in the East Treaty and revised in 1993, champions cooperation and integration, as well as solidarity across economic, social, and cultural spheres, intertwined with peace, security, and democratic governance. This holistic evolution from the economic primacy to a nexus of development and security has yielded transformative milestones over 50 years in mediating conflicts in places like Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, and others, deploying the early warning and response network, ECO1, for proactive prevention, and paving the way for the single currency ECO, which still remains a shifting target of ECOWAS and should be the campaign around it for it to be adopted as soon as possible. And in nurturing democratic resilience, ECOWAS has upheld constitutional principles, thwarted unconstitutional seizures of power, and fortified electoral processes. Civil society has been a reliable partner in these endeavors across the region, often at the forefront against UCG. As with the restoration of constitutional order in Guinea and Niger, 2009 and 2010, the Ballet Citoyen-led struggle in Burkina Faso in 2014, the TUSPA and Ma Constitution campaigns in several West African countries, and recently, the citizen-led defeat of UCG in Senegal, and then the ECOWAS's 2016-2017 mediation efforts in the Gambia that averted a possible catastrophe, thus exemplifying regional diplomacy's power, both by the regional organization and action by citizens. Economically, the common economic tariffs, the 2015 rollout has unified tariffs and ignited trade, while the West African power pool secures energy futures for the region. These propel growth with GDP forecasts topping growth figure topping 5% in key sectors in the region. Recent insights urge refining sanctions also to sidestep junta entrenchment and embrace inclusive talks, ensuring our tools evolve with the current realities. Socially and culturally, our people-centric ethos, rooted in Vision 2020 and amplified by Vision 2050, prioritizes inclusivity. Policies on gender equality and youth empowerment combat disparities, build buffers against shocks. Facing the AES departure, ECOWAS pragmatically has eased most of the sanctions against them, suspending only decision-making participation per African Union and ECOWAS guidelines to keep reconciliation doors open. This embodies our founded dream of a cohesive West Africa where solidarity triumphs over division. At 50, ECOWAS and the West Africa region find themselves one more at the crossroads, just as in the early 1990s, when the community had to choose between standing by to allow civil wars to ravage the region or intervene to reposition the regional integration project, as in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and others. Today, we need to act again, and urgently too, because terrorism is now the defining element in the security landscape of our region, and it should be the object of civil society activism, the actions of member states, and also the regional organization. As you may be aware, ECOWAS is on course to activate its 1,650 personnel counter-terrorism brigade to be funded exclusively in the beginning by ECOWAS's own resources. And I think this is very important if we need to create the necessary environment for economic endeavor to thrive. ECOWAS, understandably, also launched a bottom-up introspective analysis of the regional integration project, the outcome of which will culminate in the holding of a special summit by the end of the year or early next year to adopt a pact for the future of regional integration. The initiative has sparked debates on governance, peace, and multilateralism, tackling today's crisis while eyeing tomorrow's horizons, with CSOs as key voices in this. We are also revising the 2001 protocol on democracy and good governance to forge mechanisms for revitalizing citizen-state pacts, positioning civil society as co-architects. This assembly provides a perfect platform to constructively contribute to the ongoing national discourse through dispassionate deliberation, reflection, and resolve. Amid today's fragmentations and external pressures, civil society's pivotal role in reshaping democratic resilience aligns seamlessly with our Vision 2050 and ECOWAS of the people, peace and prosperity for all, that the ongoing reflections also would help to strengthen. This week should then offer a launchpad for groundbreaking strategies that place citizens at the center of the regional integration process. The theme for this week, also pulses with urgency in West Africa's rapidly evolving political, socio-economic, and geopolitical arena. Politically, 2025 emerges as a defining inflection point for ECOWAS, where the AES withdrawal, fueled by successive coup d'etat and military transitions in those nations, has shattered regional equilibrium, exposing the brittleness of our democratic foundation. This fragmentation, alongside constitutional manipulation for extended tenures, has an eroded trust in constitutional in-election, has strained institutional trust and ignited calls for bold governance overhauls. True to its mandate under the supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance, ECOWAS has countered with diplomacy, targeted sanctions, and mediation to reinstate constitutional rule wherever possible, yet reconciling national sovereignty with collective integration demands adaptive reforms to bolster our multilateral framework. Socioeconomically, West Africa embodies a striking duality: immense promise shadowed by peril, home to over 400 million people and combined GDP surpassing 630 billion US dollars, which ranked the region as the world's 21st largest economy. The region surges as sub-Saharan Africa's fastest grower, driven by abundant resources like vast minerals reserves, poised to fuel a $1 trillion boom. Nations such as Cote d'Ivoire, the powerhouse of the West African Economic and Monetary Union, and Nigeria, Ghana, and a number of other countries showcase robust growth through industrial diversification. We have advanced the movement of people and goods, boosted food security, and enhanced energy sharing, and invested in human capital. Yet, stark inequality, rampant informality, youth unemployment, food insecurity, and climate vulnerability persist, amplified by the scars of COVID-19 and then the global economic disruptions. Intra-regional trade in West Africa lingers at a modest 15%, despite progress via the common external tariff and the protocol. So ECOWAS's integration drive through the corridors like the Lagos-Abidjan and energy pooling seeks to break these gaps, but civil society's vigilant advocacy is indispensable for equitable, empowering policies that uplift them, the marginalized. And it is encouraging, that the African Continental Free Trade Area is headquartered here. Many, people have not even heard of what it is doing, and it is a vehicle for the economic takeoff and intra-African trade for the future, and it should be the object of advocacy also by civil society. And geopolitically, the terrain grows ever more intricate, with external powers vying for influence in the region. The EES pivot to non-traditional allies, coinciding with the Western military drawdowns in the Sahel, has ushered in competitive dynamics from players like Russia, China, and middle powers from the Middle East, exploiting divisions in resource-laden zones. Arbitrary colonial borders continue to stifle natural, ethnocultural, and economic flows, while transnational scourges, terrorism, ravaging the Sahel and the Lake Chad Basin, piracy in the Gulf of Guinea, organized crime, intercontinental clashes, intercommunal clashes, and migration surges. All these erode security and stability in the region. The Sahel exits have diluted joint security efforts against armed groups and trafficking, heightening fragmentation, which needs to be reserved through diplomacy and then through continued engagement across the divide. As pioneers in mediation and peacekeeping, from Liberia and Sierra Leone to the Gambia and Guinea-Bissau, ECOWAS remains a stabilizing anchor, but it needs the support of civil society to steady the ship of regional integration. Yet existential threats loom large, eroding democratic sinews. Coups and military access to power signal profound disillusionment with institutions stoked by corruption, governance lapses, and foreign meddling. Terrorism in the Sahel and the Lake Chad Basin displaces millions, draining resources, while climate-induced migratory pressures intensify socioeconomic strains. The AES schism not only splinters integration, but also stalls progress, as the ECOWAS President, Dr. Omar Aliou Touré, has warned in spotlighting intertwined security and democracy perils. The multipolar surge magnifies these challenges, with outsiders leveraging risks for resource grabs. Mineral riches promise prosperity, but without transparent regional stewardship, they deepen divides, destroy the environment. These imperatives call for civil society's reinvention, transcending conventional advocacy to harness technology for mobilization, dismantling polarization, and cultivating grassroots fortitude. Civil society forms democracies and yielding call, the people's megaphone, abuse sentinel, and the multi-institution citizen conduit. In this era of flux, redefining its role demands a bold evolution from reactive advocacy to a proactive, multifaceted revolution. CSOs must pioneer collaborative ecosystems that harness cutting-edge digital tools, such as AI-driven platforms for real-time mobilization, blockchain for transparency and distribution, and social media analytics to map and counter disinformation campaigns while telling our own stories. These innovations can amplify voices in remote areas, promote inclusive governance by facilitating virtual town halls that bridge the urban-rural divide, and cultivate regional value chains that empower local entrepreneurs through cross-border e-commerce networks. The West Africa Civil Society Week's emphasis on strategies to combat polarization is profoundly visionary, positioning CSOs not merely as responders, but as architects of resilient systems that preempt democratic backsliding. By fostering participatory processes, such as community-led policy forums and youth-driven innovation labs, civil society can weave a tapestry of accountability, ensuring that diverse groups, from women and youth to indigenous communities, shape the narrative and drive equitable change. At the heart of ECOWAS's vision for this partnership lies the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council for West Africa, the ECOSOC West Africa, whose establishment process was kickstarted in late 2023 as a transformative platform and interface between the community citizens and the community decision-making instances. This council will serve as a dynamic assembly where CSOs, including West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI, from all member states, convene to advise on policy, monitor implementation, and propose agenda-setting initiatives for decision-making at the regional level, thereby amplifying marginalized voices and harmonizing regional efforts, and also having a coordinating platform that all civil society organizations, community-based institutions, our traditional leaders, the private sector, and others can all converge to pass messages and also influence decision-making at the regional level. Imagine a space where grassroots activists collaborate with policymakers on everything from counter-terrorism strategies to climate adaptation plans, channeling citizen agency into tangible outcomes for an integrated, prosperous West Africa. By strategically harnessing our demographic dividend, particularly the bourgeoising youth population of the 60% that I mentioned earlier, CSOs can ignite innovations that dismantle and train narratives of division. For instance, youth-led tech lab hubs could develop applications, apps for early warning, or platforms for sustainable agriculture, fostering community-level peace building that not only resolves local disputes, but also scales up the regional stability, turning potential volatility into a powerhouse of creativity and progress. The track record of civil society's impact is both inspiring and instructive, underscoring the urgency of this redefinition. In Nigeria, CSO coalitions like the Yaga Africa Network have revolutionized election monitoring through parallel vote tabulation systems, enhancing transparency and reducing fraud in the 2023 polls, thereby bolstering public trust in democratic processes. Similarly, in Senegal, organizations such as the Rencontre Africaine pour la Défense des Droits de l'Homme, RADO, Africa Jom, and then also groups like CISLAC and others, not to talk about to talk about the West Africa Civil Society Institute and similar ones, spearheaded anti-corruption campaigns that expose high-level graft, leading to judicial reforms and greater accountability. Peace education initiatives like those run by West Africa Network for Peace Building, WANEP, have equipped thousands of community leaders with tools to mediate inter-ethnic conflict, significantly curbing violence in hotspots like Northern Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. And for over 2 decades, WACSI has invested in enhancing the institutional and operational capacity of civil society, promoting an enabling environment and open civic spaces, while also fostering a culture of resilience and sustainability within the ecosystem. And ECOWAS is so proud to declare that majority of these civil society platforms, organizations, maintain memorandum of understanding with ECOWAS, and we collaborate on all fronts. Looking forward, the redefinition must embed gender-responsive approaches to ensure women's leadership in decision-making, opening up the civil society space to more traditional actors beyond NGOs, fostering cross-border collaboration, resilience, and solidarity. More importantly, much of the success against historical dictatorships in Africa have been achieved through the unity of purpose and networking between civil society organizations in the region and the diaspora, who become the megaphone for a statement that internal civil society organizations cannot pronounce due to the environment. Gazing forward the horizon, the blueprint for democratic resilience crystallizes through unwavering collective action, where ECOWAS and civil society converge as equal architects of our destiny. Our golden jubilee reverberates with the stark imperative, change or perish. A rallying cry echoed across recent civil society forums from Abuja to Dakar, demanding a profound renaissance in regional integration that transcends rhetoric to deliver measurable impacts. In this grand reimagination, civil society must seize the vanguard, leading with audacious advocacy that reshapes the regional narrative. CSOs are uniquely positioned to champion transparent resource management, demanding enforceable standards for the equitable extraction and distribution of our mineral wealth, ensuring that revenue from gold in Burkina Faso or lithium in Niger fund education and healthcare rather than fueling conflict. Inclusive policies must be non-negotiable, with CSOs mobilizing coalitions to embed protections for vulnerable populations in trade agreements and climate accords, fostering social safety nets that mitigate shocks from economic volatility or environmental disasters. Robust early warning systems, co-developed with community sentinel, can preempt crises by integrating local intelligence with the ECOWAS system, creating a web of vigilance that spans from urban centers to rural outposts. By forging these synergies with ECOWAS through joint task forces on youth employment and gender equity, we can transmute adversities into enduring assets, transforming migration pressures into skilled labor pools, geopolitical rivalries into diversified partnerships, and democratic fractures into fortified unions. This collaborative alchemy will birth a West Africa that is not only stronger and more cohesive, but resilient to the tempests of tomorrow, where every citizen potential is unleashed for collective action. In summation, I just want to leave us with a few points that may animate our deliberations going forward. As you begin the West Africa Civil Society Week deliberations, I encourage you to engage reflection on key cross-cutting issues such as to paraphrase actually the words of Frantz Fanon, a famous Pan-Africanist over here, that we are a generation, and every generation discovered its mission, either to fulfill it or to betray it. I hope we are going to define our mission to here, discover it, define it, and that we are actually going to fulfill it as the clarion call from, Cabral joins us. So the first point I want to look at is that we talk a lot about governance deficits, but the basic unit of governance is the political party. And political parties are some of the weakest institutions that we have in the region. So the nature of political parties are the fundamental units of governance. How do we enhance their capacities to ensure internal governance, internal democracy, that integrate the voices and agency of women and young people, and ensure issue-based programming and manifestos? That is very important if we have to tackle bad governance at the source. And then, two, how do we integrate Africa's traditions and values and inclusive representative culture that we have into our liberal democracy today? In place of the systems like the first past the post, and even in some countries where in legislative elections, we have a list of candidates on a coalition or party list. The list always contains the men at the top and the women at the top. So if that party even gains, 4 seats, before even it gets down to the women, all the places are occupied by the men. Just because of the weak voices of women within, the decision-making processes, in it. So we have to relook representation. Do we have to look at forms of proportional representation? Do we have to make sure that local government at the district and local levels are devoid of political machinations and they are community-based properly without control from the government and the political parties about? That is a question we have to ask. We should also debate about the utility of short-term presidential mandates in the presidential, in our fledgling democracies. We are in a system. If you have a society like US, UK, you can put an idiot in charge of power. And the systems will make sure that governance still continues to work because of institutions. Our institutions are still fledgling. We have not been able to devise a national vision in most of our countries. What is our vision? What are our priorities? Any party that comes to power wants to come with its own vision and not the national vision. Under those circumstances, term limits like mandates like 4 years, what really do we expect a president with a 4-year mandate with those weak institutions to achieve instead of concentrating efforts on winning maybe the next election? So the duration of our mandate, I think we have to look at it very critically going forward. 3, we need also to reinforce the autonomy and independence of the judiciary. We have already mentioned the judiciary as the weakest link in our democratic process. The parliaments are becoming more competitive. The executive is what it is, but the judiciary, how do we ensure the security of tenure and their autonomy so that they can take independent, decisions in all forms of governance processes. I think it is a fair subject for debate going forward. And then 5, the effective integration of young people in national development and regional integration processes. Do we need a type of Marshall Plan for young people, or a Marshall Plan, for example, for the Sahel, for the Lake Chad Basin? If you look at where terrorism is thriving, it is thriving in the areas of our region where climate change and others have made life virtually impossible. People talk about Boko Haram operating around the Lake Chad Basin. The basic reason, is that the ecosystem, the economic system that was built around Lake Chad crumbled, because Lake Chad lost about 90% of its water mass due to climate change. So what do young people do as alternative sources of livelihood? Is to pick up arms and join bandits, join terrorists. In the Sahel, it is a similar picture. And in West Africa, really, we have 3 zones that are so vulnerable that we have to look at them very critically as the base structure that will trigger development and prevent conflict. How do we resuscitate Lake Chad? How do we make the Sahel green again? When a lot of geological surveys and others shows that beneath the Sahel is, a storage of millions and millions gallons of water that can be tapped. How do we look at it? And then we look at Futajalo Mountains. Futajalo Mountains is the source of all the major rivers in the region, including River Niger, Volta, the Senegal, river and others. Futajalo Mountains are losing their vegetation and other things, and that is going to be the next frontier of crisis in our region if we do not arrest this. Of course, not to talk also about the Gulf of Guinea that has become the hotbed of piracy, transnational organized crime at sea, and human trafficking and others. So we need to target those, get the region and member states to make sure that we pay attention to these vast geographic areas to regenerate them as a major source of preventing, crisis in the future. Next is the whole, how do we also galvanize the community-based organizations? Because we have NGOs that often are elitist, that often have the know-how to corner resources, project management, project design, and all that. Can our civil society, WACSI, expand the capacity building for our rural women's networks, traders, groups, and others, for them to be able to present projects and give them a voice using modern technologies today? I think is something that we need also to look at. And then finally, I would want to talk about reparations. The president of Ghana, the prime minister of Barbados, and others at the just ended UN General Assembly all talked about reparations. Often people tell us that we are suffering from the effects of colonialism that divided our continent. But let's be very frank. Colonialism in Africa did not last more than a century. And most countries that have developed today also suffered colonialism, including the United States.
Well, you are listening there to the voice of His Excellency Ambassador Abdel Fattah Musa, the Commissioner, Political Affairs, Peace and Security, ECOWAS Commission. And that was the live coverage of the West Africa Civil Society 2025 happening in the Ghanaian capital, Accra. We'll have to end at this point to prepare for our midday news. But you can join us on the news for highlights of this event and report coming in from it. Please stay with us. We'll be back in the next 5 minutes thereabout for a second edition of Newslink.